everyone, and thank you for tuning in. As always, I am Kaylee Batesman, the Content Director at She Can Code, and I have the fabulous Anais Urlichs with me today, who is a developer advocate from Aqua Security, and we will be discussing reasons for the lack of women in tech and the barriers they faced. Welcome, Anais.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. We're really excited to have you with us this morning. And now, obviously, reasons why there are a lack of women in tech, this has been asked countless times, but the dial has still not moved much from 19% of women in the UK tech industry. So before we get into the discussion for today, though, can we hear a little bit about yourself and your background, please?
Sure. So I work as open source developer advocate at Aqua Security. Aqua Security is a cloud-native security company focused on providing supply chain security. So basically securing all of the assets that go into your software development process. Now, I work specifically with the open source tools at the company. So all my work is focused on promoting those tools and sharing content on the tools, providing developer education and collaborating with the community as a whole. Before I joined Aqua Security, I was working as site reliability engineer for the past year in 2021. And before that, I was also working for several years as developer advocate for various startups and industries.
When you joined tech, did you know that you wanted a career in technology, or is it something that you fell into?
Yeah, so the process, I guess the decision happened quite gradually. So my first degree was in information systems, and information systems is a mixture between management and computer science. However, I dropped out of that degree halfway through because I wanted to pursue a computer science degree and work at the same time. So I'm studying for the past 5 years an online computer science degree at a UK university and working. So yeah,
ongoing.
the decision. yeah, it's an ongoing thing. It's quite lengthy to do a part-time degree online. However, you get the work experience and you get to focus on different parts of get industry experience. And as part of that, throughout those past 5 years, my career move into tech has happened quite gradually. My first job was as technical writer, as technical analyst for a startup. And then from there, I went into software engineering and then into developer advocacy.
Oh, wow. And so during that time, then you decided to embark on a computer science degree. Yeah. Was that something, did somebody encourage you in that area, or, is it something that you just thought that would really help me in the direction that I want to take my career?
So it's pretty much the second along the second line of thoughts. So at the university where I was studying my information systems degree, we had the option to work with various startups from the master's program. And throughout collaborating with those startups and helping them with different projects, I realized that my interest was very much in working with technological startups, with startups that are focused on SaaS businesses or really on the infrastructure and providing technical solution side of things. So that's where that initial interest came from, and then the desire to actually focus my degree solely on computer science and move my career further in that direction.
Yeah. And in your opinion, what makes a career in tech so interesting?
I think because it's a very versatile area, right? Career in tech does not just mean one thing. If you if you compare it, for instance, for medicine to medicine is medicine, and you have quite a same kind of career path usually into medicine, and then you specialize in different fields, and overall it's medicine. However, in tech, everybody's coming from a different background. There's no one standard path. There's no one rule on how to do things. There's no, even when you create a project, when you're working on an algorithm, there's not one way of doing things. It's always the answer is always it depends, right? To every question, it depends. What is your environment? What is your setup? What are your goals? What do you try to achieve? What solution do you want to provide? And based on that, the process on how do you get the end result, and the end result will be completely different as well. And I think that's what makes tech so interesting, and having a career in tech so interesting, because everybody can can excel in different ways, right?
Yeah. And yourself, you're always learning in technology, which is something that you're still doing yourself, and you can always progress and always learn. It's, you know, it's very fast paced, but it seems like you don't seem to just get in the industry and stay in one job. There are so many opportunities to learn and grow in tech.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we see, especially in newer industries and newer sectors, whether that's machine learning or cloud native technologies. Anything that's working with a technology that's only a few years old, it doesn't matter how many years of experience you've gathered beforehand, because ultimately that technology is so new that you can start at any time, at any point in time, and become a professional in that area, right? Yeah, it's really about continuous learning and staying interested.
Keep moving forward. Yeah. And allowing you, I suppose, as well, being at the right company that allows you to keep moving forward and keep growing, not just within your role, but into the future ones that you would like to move into. It sounds like, you know, you had a lot of training, you had a lot of great, you know, background and experience, but have you faced any obstacles on your career journey, and how did you overcome them?
Lots. I would say lots. It's I remember when I decided to change to a computer science degree, my mother asked me whether I really want to do that to myself. That was her initial thought. It was basically like her seeing, she was working at a tech company and doing kind of bookkeeping related tasks, managerial related tasks there. But she saw obviously how male dominant the industry is, and how also some men were behaving in that field. And that's what triggered her question, obviously, of do you want to do that to yourself? And I was fortunate to work at startups that were quite advanced in terms of providing diversity and encouraging women to get involved and providing opportunities. However, the industry itself has struggling with lots of different stereotypes, right? When you hear engineer, developer, software engineer, lots of people will think about, just by default, they will think about a man, not a woman, right? And that that translates into lots of into different kind of treatment, I would say, for women versus men in the space. So that's, I guess, the most I struggled with that stereotype of demonstrating that I was as capable as my male colleagues. And the language that goes with it, that oftentimes is not, people don't realize that it is discriminating until you point it out. So it turns you, I think you have two options: either constantly advocating for yourself and advocating for the change, for that language to change, and pointing out that there has to change to happen and so on, or you avoid it, and avoiding goes then with, you have to get a peace of mind that you're okay with that, you're okay with being talked on a certain way. And I think I've seen both ways work out for people. I choose the former, of constantly speaking up for myself, even if it can be tiring.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can imagine. You mentioned that your mum, when she worked in an office, she could actually see, you know, that type of environment and what it looked like going into a male-dominated tech environment. I'm curious to know, in terms of what's happened with COVID and, you know, working from home and hybrid working, have you seen a change there? Has that kind of leveled the playing field a little bit for ladies, or has it got worse, do you think?
Yeah. I think it's gotten a lot better. So for most of my career, I've worked remotely. I've worked for different companies from different countries and had to travel to the office or similar, but I was used to working remotely. However, most of my colleagues weren't used to it. They were working in the office. So what I would see throughout the pandemic is that my male colleagues had to get involved more in tasks at home that are usually stereotyped towards the woman in the house having to take care of that, right? So I think that the past years caused men to have to get more involved and actually experience that getting that balance, that work-life balance of managing both responsibilities, both type of responsibilities. So that's one thing I realized changed, that I think men are more understanding now of the things that women have to take care of, and that life sometimes gets in the way. So now at Aqua, I have a lot of times it happens that a colleague of mine can't be fully present at work because they have their sick kid at home and they're working from home. And I think that makes it so much more inclusive, because it doesn't just trickle down to the women in the team and then them might feeling that they are left out, or that they can't give as much as their male colleagues in because of those additional responsibilities, right?
Yes, and you mentioned there when somebody that has a sick child at home, for instance, instead of them having to run around and trying to fit that in, and then by the time you see them again a couple of days later, they look incredibly tired themselves. They've just managed to get through their week by working from home and having that sick child at home, and they seem a lot happier in themselves. They're not mentally burnt out by the end of the week, and you get more out of them as a colleague working on whatever project it is with you, because they've had that flexibility at home. I mean, it's absolutely had a positive effect on all of us. We've mentioned obviously the good things, and there have been a lot of positives so far. Do you think there are still barriers for women in tech? We still have a long way to go, don't we?
We do. I think it got easier to break into tech, to get started, that initial step. However, I have more and more people reach out to me, more and more friends as well, who got into tech, who have a tech or engineering related career, and they ask me for advice about different situations they encounter along their career of encountering sexism, encountering discrimination. And a lot of times they're even uncertain if it's discriminating, or if it's if the struggle that they are facing is actually a struggle, is actually something specific to them, because it's sometimes we go a long way without facing any discrimination, and then all of a sudden we might change role, we might have a new colleague, or something changes and we all of a sudden experience it for the first time, and we might not understand of what's happening. And I think that's one of the struggles, and it's one thing that we have to keep speaking up about, that sexism in the space still exists. It's very much present in day-to-day life in various forms. And if somebody's experienced something that doesn't feel right, then they should have a space to talk about it, and to maybe get help and change the way things are, or
I used to work I worked for a long time writing about women in tech and the barriers and getting more females obviously into the industry. I had a break a few years ago from this particular area to look after a parent that wasn't well, and I moved to a company that was closer to home, and that was easier for me at the time, and in terms of my personal life. And since then I moved around to a couple of companies, but I hadn't quite realized that those comments and the things that you mentioned here, they're still very much alive. And because I'd moved out of the positive bubble of talking about women in tech and diversity, and I'd moved off to a few companies that, you know, that I did different things, and I wrote about other topics. I didn't quite realize that those little quips and that what we call banter is still very much alive, and it did make me think, I really do I miss writing about the positive side of things, because it's a baptism of fire sometimes that you realize that there is still so much that we need to do. And as you say, people don't always realize as well that you're being discriminated until you really get quite far down the line and you realize, actually, somebody said something to me and that's not quite right, and I do want to speak up about it, and who do I go to? What can women do to overcome these barriers, do you think?
I think the first thing is try to build a strong network of like-minded people around you. It's great to have diversity of thought, but in certain situations you need somebody whom you can trust with those situations to get advice from. Sometimes it helps to just get it out, get your frustration out, and then distract yourself with something else. Sometimes you can act upon your frustration. Sometimes you can't act in a productive way upon your frustration. That's one thing. Get yourself a support network. There are lots of groups online, which is great. And over the past years, I've realized the value of those groups. At the beginning, to be honest, I was constantly thinking that diversity should be included in any space, right? That I didn't necessarily want to participate in women-only spaces. But through my experiences, I now see the value in having a safe space. So do build yourself a safe space before you need it. That's my first advice.
Yes. And sharing that you're not the only person that might feel a certain way, and just hearing it from somebody else is nice to hear. Actually, that's okay. And now, what can we do about it? Now I realize it's not just me, but was I being sensitive? But hearing lots of other people say the same thing as you, that really helps to then find a way forward.
To feel validated, exactly, that it's not you in most cases who did anything wrong. I think that's something else you have to keep in mind. It's usually when you encounter these situations, it's about the other person. It's about their misconceptions. It's about their way of thinking. It has nothing to do with you. It doesn't devalue you in any way. You are as amazing of a person as you were a few minutes before. It's just about the other person who is struggling with their own things and who have to understand that certain communication and certain treatment is not okay. So that's the first advice. Second advice I would give to people is really use being part of a underrepresented group as an advantage. And I have done that in the past years. There's lots of disadvantages, lots of struggle that we are facing, but at the same time, we can use it as to our advantage as well. I skipped companies from company to company a lot of times, about every year throughout my career in the past. And that was really driven by unjust treatment that I didn't feel I had to respond to, I had to deal with. And if you are listening to this and you find yourself in a position where you're struggling maybe at your current company, there are lots of companies who are looking for talented individuals who want to join their team and who want to provide diversity, because it's an advantage to a company to have a diverse team. There's research that shows that diverse teams, diverse leadership does a lot better than having just homogeneous thoughts and work patterns, right? So that's definitely the second advice I would give. Like, really use being part of this group, being part of Women in Tech as an advantage to you, and you don't have to sit things out if you are struggling. There's really no need to do that. And
that's great advice as well. And a lot of that as well is things that you can do yourself, and you can feel empowered and make change in your role. What do you think companies can do more to create an inclusive culture? We had a lady on here the other day that was discussing we had a quick discussion about the fact it's more than just a Slack channel about, you know, just sort of sharing our views about diversity and inclusion. And it's actually more about how it makes that employee feel in their day-to-day. But do you think there's anything else that companies can do?
I think definitely having a zero tolerance policy. That's the first thing, that it should not happen in the first place. If it happens, if somebody is discriminated in any shape, form, it should not be tolerated. They should have a way to bring it up to their managers, and have, maybe if the manager is not necessarily the trusted person, have somebody assigned within the company, ideally a woman, somebody who is part of women in tech, similar, who can understand you more easily, who can like relate to you in a better way. So when you have that contact person, it becomes easier to know that it's their job to listen to you, right? Like a lot of times we don't want to bring something up that's yet another thing coming from us, right? Like it's usually women who like to talk about interpersonal relationships and how things are not necessarily working out the way we want it to work out. And men usually just stay quiet about things when they are not, and just maybe ignore it if things are not going well. So having an assigned person is, I guess, one thing to encourage conversation. The other thing is something that I would love more companies to do is having diversity goals. So make it as part of every team that there have to be certain goals within the team to foster diversity, whether that's mentorship between more senior employees with more junior employees, but encouraging that it's part of your performance of how well you help others and how you help underrepresented members within the team. That would make it easier to get, I guess, to access knowledge, to access opportunities, right? Because we have lots of women who start in junior roles, right? Who start getting into tech, then lots of them drop out once they start having a family, right? And things become more difficult. They can't keep up with the job requirements, with the demand, and then ultimately they can't access the same kind of opportunities. So making it as part of the company's goal, I think that's a way to manifest it and to hold yourself accountable, because like my philosophy is, if nobody takes ownership and nobody's held accountable, things don't happen. Yeah. Yes,
absolutely. I completely agree with, you know, making sure that people are accountable, and that you have somebody that you say, not just somebody that you can go to and report something to, but somebody that can actually relate to you as well. You know, there's no point having somebody in that role that really doesn't understand or even empathize with you about what it is that you're going to them to you know, even confide in them, not necessarily report, but just to confide in somebody. One challenge that women face in the industry is a lack of role models. Do you have any role models in tech?
So to be honest, I don't have somebody specific whom I would consider who fits to me like the stereotype of what a role model is. A lot of times I think we associate role models with somebody who's maybe more advanced, who has worked in a space for longer, who has acquired skills that we would like to gain and similar. So in that sense, I don't have a role model, but I have different people in my network whom I look up to for different things, right? And those are both men and women in the space. So I guess I go to different people for different kind of advice, and that's really supporting me, and that's fulfilling the I guess the part of a role model for me. Now it would be nice to have a more mentorship kind of relationship, And I guess if you have the option to build that with somebody, to build a mentorship kind of relationship, then definitely go for it and invest into that. I have mentored, however, other women in the space and women breaking into tech. So I've been on the other line of the other part of the conversation, I guess, more. But yeah, there were lots of I was fortunate to meet lots of men who have really helped me throughout my career and taken an active part in helping me advance and access opportunities. So I think definitely build yourself a support network of like-minded people and women in this space, but don't exclude the possibility of meeting also others who can give you access to more opportunities.
It's about keeping that keeping your options open and making sure that you have a range of people in your network and resources. Talking about resources there, do you have any other resources that you tap into? Do you have any favorite podcasts or books, women in tech groups you're a part of?
Yeah, definitely. So I love psychology books and books related on behaviorism and just that sort of genre.
Yes.
And it really helps me to understand situations that might have been confusing or irritating, or where I didn't really understand what was going on or how I could have behaved differently, more effectively, or also for me personally, right? A lot of times we might encounter a situation and we get really wound up and don't really understand what's going on. And it's sometimes more hurtful to us than to anybody else. So I love reading those, listening to those with audiobooks. And one book that I'm listening to right now is 13 Things Mentally Strong Women Do by Amy Morin. And she's a psychiatrist, and she's referencing different advice on different types of behavior and situations and ways to deal with situations with stories from her own patients and the things that she has experienced and she has seen other women struggle with and experience. And that's really helping me personally to make sense of things, of different situations.
Yes.
Yeah. No, besides that, there are lots of resources. It's really about identifying those resources. There are lots of different groups, Women Who Code, Girls Code, who provide also a social network. And sometimes it just helps to go there and have a rant about things, and people are just going to be like, yeah, we get you. and that's it, right? Sometimes that's all you need. Sometimes you're not looking for advice, right? Sometimes you just need somebody to talk to. So yeah, or sometimes I love reading blog posts on the experience of others, right? And that's really helpful just because it's validating, right? It's validating your own experiences and providing you a different perspective, or maybe providing you with a perspective if you didn't quite know how to make sense of a situation. So those are some resources I like to use, blog posts, also podcasts. I listen to lots of different podcasts also by women in different industries, because a lot of times they struggle with the same thing in different formats, right? Like it's accelerated in a tech space, but also in different industries, women face discrimination, right? Underrepresented groups face discrimination, and for much longer than in tech as well. So they have built other strategies, other ways to go about it. And sometimes it really just helps to listen to the perspective of them, of somebody also who's outside your industry, who's maybe thinking about everything a bit differently, right? Just being outside of that circle.
Yeah, and you're right. It's interesting to hear from people that are not just in tech, or those that have come into tech and their roots in. And you're right, reading about people's careers, their career experience. Everybody has a very different career path, and it's nice sometimes to pick up on tips that other ladies can offer for us that move around the industry, for instance. we are running out of time, and I have one last question to ask you. Do you have any advice for women looking to get into the industry?
Yes, I would say don't wait. A lot of times,
Great advice, yes.
don't wait. Don't wait until you have the skills, because you will never have the skills, right? A lot of times, and there's also research backing that up, right? Women apply for a role when they have 100% of the skills, versus men apply for a role when they have 60% of the skills or less, right? And they feel very confident about getting that role. And one thing that helped me, I guess, throughout my my career so far, is just going for things, just asking for opportunities, and clearly stating the things that you don't know yet, or that you're not too sure about. That's completely okay, and a lot of times people will appreciate your honesty, and at the same time they appreciate you standing up for what you do now, and what you do want to get to, and what you do want to try out and achieve. So if you're starting in tech, if you want to get started, just start applying for junior positions. And the worst thing that can happen is that you get the interview experience, that you get feedback on your interview experience, and you don't get the role. But nothing worse will happen. It might take some time to apply and to interview, but ultimately you will walk away with an enriching experience either way, or even with a job. Which is even better. So don't wait.
Experience is invaluable, as you say, either way, whether you get the job or not. And also, if you're new to tech and you want to look into different careers, and whether or not a certain role is for you, then interviewing is a great way to do that, to hear more about, whether or not the role is for you and which company you would actually like to join. So yeah, that's great advice. Yeah. Well, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us today, Anais. It's been a pleasure. So thank you so much for coming along and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
Thank you, and to everybody, as always, listening in. We thank you for joining us as always, and we hope to see you again next time.